Hey guys, it's Nico from Steel City Vintage. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the love affair that I have not only for Vacheron as a brand, which I'm sure you guys are well aware of already, but of two specific watches in general, the reference 4073 and the 4217. Now, before I get into those watches specifically, I want to backtrack a little bit to give us some context. Now, if anybody has been paying attention in the watch world in general, we see that the Patek Philippe reference 96 has been having a little bit of a resurgence of late. This is especially when you consider steel examples with the applied brigade numerals that are fetching a huge number for those watches right now. Now, if you've been paying attention to the watch market, this was something that was sort of predictable. As a whole, even though I feel like the general public still loves large watches, the watch enthusiasts have been transitioning towards the affection for smaller watches as a whole. So paying attention to that transition, coupled with a brand as historic and popular as Patek itself, you could see that the 96 was due to have some increased interest. Now, outside of it just being a small watch, I believe that this resurgence inherently has to do with the actual watch itself. And what I mean by that is the actual case profile. Now, it's been said before, but it bears saying, and this is not something that I came up with, but something that I read and really does hold water, which is if you were to ask somebody to just draw a watch, maybe even like a little kid, they would draw a 96. I mean, that's what that watch is. It is the most classical representation of a wristwatch to date. So why do I mention the 96 in the same breath of these other two references from a different company? Well, the key is in the case itself, the maker of which, named Antoine Gerlach, I think I said that right, was the manufacturer for not only the 96 but the 570, another really popular reference within the Patek Philippe Calatrava lineup. This same case maker made the reference 4073 and the 4217 respectively. And we can take a look at the similarities between these watches and the Calatrava's 96 and 570. They have a very similar case profile. Taking a look at the watches, we have a very similar three-piece case design with the flat back case back, the mid case, and the flat bezel to round it out. These watches also utilize a somewhat generic looking but yet oddly fitting flats crown, very similar to the one utilized in Patek's Calatravas. Now, these lugs don't have the same drilled lug profile that you would get in the 96, but they are angled such that the watch itself really does sit comfortably and close to the wrist. You also get that beautiful horizontal brushed finish on the mid case, the lateral portions of the lugs, and the middle of the watch when you're looking at it from a side profile. The movements are also going to be slightly different, since obviously one has a center seconds function and one has a sub-seconds function. However, the e-bausch that they use from JLC is very similar, and if you end up taking a look at both of their movements, they also are very similar in nature. Very high grade finishing, with different sub-iterations with both. Some came in 17 jewels, some came in 18 jewels, with different levels of finishing. Some came with Geneva seals, some did not. However, when you're just taking that basic caliber and comparing the two, they are very similar. The dial configuration is really going to be a personal preference. I am a time-only guy. I really love small precious metal time-only watches. That's, you know, really my thing, especially manually wound. But with that being said, I do like to break up the monotony and have a sub-second dial. I just feel like from a classical sense, there is that little extra bit of vintage charm, and it kind of breaks up the monotony of the dial a little bit. Now, why do I bring up these references and then just compare them to another watch? Well, it's not really about buying a homage, because I don't really believe in buying a homage. I don't think that, in my personal experience and preference, buying something that looks similar to something else ends up scratching my itch, for example. It ends up just making me want the actual watch that I wanted more, not less. So it's not really about the comparison to another watch, but more of what the watch represents itself. Vacheron to me is the classical watch brand, in the same sense that Patek Philippe is, with obviously doing things in a very different way. They were more exotic with their case design iterations, and kind of ventured out more into an adventurous path in that sense, and obviously their quantities and varieties within each reference also was a lot different of a strategy than Patek Philippe had. However, I still consider them the classical watchmaker, and that is why these references speak to me in general. They look like a classical dress watch. The case itself is just the epitome of classical design. They sit nice and flat on the wrists. The lugs are angled so that it sits comfortably and nice and close. So wearing a Vacheron and having my mindset of that classical watchmaker, wearing a case design that is as close to perfect as I believe you can get in a wristwatch, just completes that package for me. And the reason I'm presenting it to you guys today is because when you consider the 9.6 and the 570, there's a huge diameter gap, right? The 96 is 31 millimeter, while the 570 is 36 millimeter. These Vacherons sit very comfortably at the middle of those two, at 34 millimeters. So if you're somebody who, you know, is caught between the two in terms of size, you think the 30 millimeter is too small, you think 36 millimeter for a classical dress watch is just too big for your wrist, I think that these are worthy of your consideration if you can find one.